Hey, Jessie, welcome to the sisterhood.
Hi, good morning.
Well, we are already just loving our conversation with you. And we just found out you're also in Colorado, like Alex. So this
Not
is very exciting news.
it is because not just Colorado, it's like 20 minutes away
Yeah.
from me.
That's a big deal
Yeah,
in
with
Denver.
traffic. That's with traffic, right?
Yeah, because we almost played at Thornton High School for the playoffs. So I did actually map it out to see how long it was going to be 18 minutes from my house. So Jessie, we are just delighted to meet you. We think that you are delightful, and we're excited for you to be talking with us and with our listeners.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to make new friends. I actually really enjoy that.
So, Jessie, you have interesting training. So, you are trained in outdoor education. You also have a Harvard degree in neuroeducation. And I would just love to know how these connect. How do these come together? I mean, we are talking about leading our lives today. And so, we're going to dive into both adventure and transformation. And I'm thinking there's a connection here. So, help us with that.
Yeah, I mean, everything makes sense sort of when you put it in context and connect it. And I guess not everything, but a lot of things do.
A lot of things do. Yeah.
So I went to undergrad to be a high school science teacher and have like 3 majors and 3 minors in that. But the Lord called me into full-time ministry right out of college instead of I was going to be a chemistry teacher. So called it into full-time ministry, ended up taking that jump, which is like I have commitment issues, and I made that decision in a week, which is kind of actually miraculous. And I dated my husband for 5 years, committed to full-time ministry in a week.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And when you're taking people out into the wilderness, they're doing things that can impact their life. And so we wanted our students to have, these are high school and adults, to have a divine human encounter, but I didn't want that to be death, right? That's not the encounter that we were hoping that they would have with God. So I became very interested, since education was kind of my passion. I became very interested in how to teach somebody something once so that they would remember it with a high degree of accuracy, like how to stop themselves with an ice axe on a snowfall. Because we had a window to train that, and then it would be like 2 weeks later that they needed to use that. And that's how I became interested in the neuroscience of learning. Now, my dad, I'm also like a mini-me of my dad, who was a guide on Mount McKinley and climbed Everest, got me into rock climbing when I was 5, first mountaineering trip when I was 7. And he has a PhD in adult learning in the brain. So he and I would talk. So we were not only climbing partners, but we were also like academic nerd partners, and started having the conversation of, what were we seeing in research? What were we learning in books? And I started to apply the research to the training we did at the wilderness ministry. But what started as a risk management endeavor quickly became a discipleship endeavor, because I wanted to have a conversation with someone once. That's all I had, was 30 minutes with them. How could I have a conversation that changed their eternity? Because now it's not their life at stake, but it's, they're thriving and their eternal nature at stake. And so I started applying the neuroscience to those kinds of conversations. And then eventually I went to Harvard in my 30s, after I had been doing this for about 10 years. So we developed a model, my dad and I developed a model of how the brain changes and how to teach according to that I took to Harvard, and then subsequently published academically, and have lectured at Harvard a couple times. But we discovered it in the wilderness in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, because, what else are you going to do? You're just going to try stuff, see if it works. Don't know you can't.
Well, I have a lot of other things I do that aren't that. So we can fill up our time with other things. Okay, so neuroeducation, can you define that a little bit for the listener, what exactly that means?
Yeah, so it's the science of how the brain changes and receives and holds new information. And my specific degree is an interdisciplinary between neuroscience, which is like the brain parts and the chemistry and like the biology. So neuroscience, cognitive psychology, which is not clinical psychology. I'm not a therapist, but cognitive psychology. So the soul, how the mind and the brain and the personhood work, and then learning environments. So how to design learning environments that work with our biology and our soul and our personhood. So mind, brain education, educational neuroscience.
Amazing. Like, I just want to sit down with you for hours and just learn. So can you tell us, how does the brain transform?
Okay, so I'm going to apologize if I hurt anybody's heart right now with this, because it's going to be different than probably what you were told. And so I just want to say that up front, a little care here to get started. Most of us think that if we have information and the ability to make a choice, that creates transformation. But that's not true. Because if it were true, then I wouldn't eat the cookie and I wouldn't have to fast over Lent in order to gain the willpower to not eat the cookie, right? So that doesn't work. It seems like it should, but it doesn't. That's not how God created us. Instead, it's our identity and who we know we are, and then the people that we belong to. When we lean into that, when we say, oh, this is who I am, and this is what my people do, that's how we transform. So, the brain isn't interested in truth. It's interested in protecting identity, and the heart isn't interested in truth. It's interested in hanging on to belonging. But the spirit is interested in truth. So if the spirit leads that identity formation and leads that belonging, then we can transform at a biological level. That's how God created us. So it's both much more simple than we have made it, and it's much more it requires us to be much more brave. So
this is so fascinating. Okay.
I feel like that was a lot right there.
No, I'm like pausing, going, okay, so if the spirit is not present, does this explain why we see adolescents really drawn toward becoming like their peers and adopting those behaviors? Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, if the spirit of truth is not present, then whatever comes into your path that you want to belong to, then that becomes your truth. Is that how that works?
Well, that's a specific stage of development that all teenagers engage in. And so there's a lot of psychology work behind that called stages of faith development from a guy named James Fowler. And everyone as a teenager, as a natural product of going through puberty, starts to do that. We become aware of how other people see us. And so we try on different groups. All teenagers do this, try on different groups to see which one resonates with who we are. We're trying to find ourselves by finding people that we feel like we fit with. The interesting thing is that 50% of adults never grow beyond that place of the way that they make meaning of their life. So it's still the group understanding, the group holds the truth, the group defines what's right, wrong, good, bad. And 50% of adults are still there. If you transition out of that, and it takes some deconstruction to do that, it takes deconstructing what the group knows to then come to your own conclusions of, okay, well, wait a minute, what do I think? What do I believe? Who do I say I am? And then we have a values-based understanding of the world. And then we create new belonging based on coherent or the same values and shared values, not just proximity or, the people that I always knew, the place I always was. So those are different ways of understanding the world. And one isn't better than the other. I don't think that one is good and one is bad. But they're both about how do I see myself? And then how do I understand the group that I belong to? So one is values-based. The other is, hey, these are my people, and I can't really tell you why, but they're my people. It's my family, right? It's a family tribal identity. So teenagers shop for trying to find themselves until they find places that resonate with them as they're forming and discovering who they are. So the brain is designed to protect that and to take us on this journey. So that's why, like, the information and choice path just has nothing to do with it. right? It's all a journey of identity and belonging.
So where do we start? I mean, if we're starting with identity, because that's, I mean, if I'm looking at this as a 1, 2, 3, combination, and I know they're all equally important, but, or maybe they're not, maybe that's a question, but do we start with identity?
I usually do. How would somebody finish the statement? I am what? And it's why when I work with people in journeys of transformation, I use the hero's journey as the outline and the framework, because that starts with I am an ordinary person and this is my ordinary world, and I'm about to go on an adventure. And then as we go on the adventure, we find who our people are, because our people might be different than the people that, we started with or that we live everyday life with, or maybe not. Maybe those people get to go on the adventure with us. So I do start with identity and then find the right group or answer those questions of belonging, because it's going to be different based on what the adventure is. I don't know. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah. So I'm looking at it from this angle of like, we're trying to lead our lives, right? Like we're trying to lead our lives better than maybe we have been doing it. So I think I guess I want to get practical a little bit with, let's take a woman who's in her early 40s, who is like, okay, I really want to become all of who I've been made to become. How do they go on that? I love the hero's journey. I mean, the hero's journey, like that resonates with me, right? We all love that story. We want to live that story. And so how do we go on that hero's journey in the middle of life?
I like to have people start with answering that I am statement and just fill in as many like endings. I am female. I am 43. I am, whatever the rest of that statement would, could possibly have, and just kind of name the everyday, name the normal, name the status quo. And then for me, like what is the adventure that, or the opportunity or the place outside your comfort zone that God is inviting you into, that the Spirit is inviting you into? And then don't worry about the rest. Just kind of focus on the lesson and the adventure at hand, right? You can't do all the things all at the same time. And so the hero's journey, for those who don't know, is this storyline, and it's in all the movies now. But it was identified in the 1950s by a guy named Joseph Campbell. And he looked at all of these epic tales from all across cultures on the planet. So it's a universal narrative, which I think in and of itself is fascinating, that humans would repeat the same arc of storytelling and what the ideal life looks like. I mean, that alone is like crazy. But it's the storyline that you have a normal person who gets called to the adventure. They turn down the adventure. Like everyone turns down the adventure the first time, except for Jesus. Jesus is the only one who didn't like turn down the call, which is also fascinating. But we get called, we turn it down, and then life compels us. Something in the journey and the story compels us to have to go and say yes. We find a mentor, and we find friends and allies, and we have trials and struggles, and they're all kind of building. And I'm a video game generation girl, so they're all building to the big boss, right? That is the big trial, the big thing that requires our ordinary person to make a choice, to be different, to have an aha moment. And then they go from being an ordinary person to a hero, and they overcome and they win the big boss. They have that thing that changes it. It happens, they become transformed. And then they go back to their ordinary world, and they're different, but the world is the same. And that sets up the sequel, because now they have a new adventure. So as a very practical thing, when I'm coaching and working with people, identifying what the call is, what is the adventure you're being invited into? And then, hey, do you have a mentor? Do you have people? And if you don't, then okay, how do you pray for that? How do you lean into that? How do you start to search that? Because there's an order to the journey, to some degree. And so you want to be looking for those pieces as you walk. So then what are you learning, right? What is the difference that you're looking to learn? What is the question that is either, is being asked of you of the Spirit, or that you're asking of the Spirit. And starting to wrestle with that, because it just, struggles come, the struggles happen. The struggle is the point, because it's got to take you to that aha moment place. And so as we embrace the struggle, we feel it and we embrace it. And the Lord then changes something in our core of our identity. That's our aha moment, that identity change. And then we get to experience more of him. And that's like the prize and the reward on this side of eternity, is the fact we can live differently than we were before that. So that's kind of how the hero's journey works. And so when I'm with somebody, I try to identify, where are they in the journey? What step are they in? And so then what is the next thing? And how do I come and meet them well in that place? So you have to discern that first, and then I can walk with them well.
Okay, you said something that I want to go back to. You said that the change is the identity piece. I would guess that a lot of people, when they're asked the question, what's the adventure you're being invited into, or that there is something very tangible on the other end. And I would say for a lot of women who may be listening, the challenge that they're feeling has to do with external circumstances. Like, I have a child who's an addict, or this is a challenge that I have to walk through. And my hope is that at the end, everything's going to be better, or there's going to be a different result. But what I hear you saying is those external results may not change. The reward is the internal change of understanding our relationship and our identity in Christ better, because we are going through that fire. Am I hearing you correctly in that?
Yeah. And I think we've kind of romanticized adventure a little bit. Adventure is about enduring the suck and hopefully finding the amazing thing on the other side. I mean, go watch any of the mountain climbing movies, right? It's about struggle and overcoming. It's not a vacation. That's why vacation is called vacation. And adventure is about being shaped, about, being up against circumstances that could take you out, and, learning who God says you are in that place. So whether, for the example that you gave of having a child who's an addict, you can't make choices for them, right? You can't make choices for other people. And you don't know how that story goes. I mean, you don't get to summit every mountain you climb. Like nothing, there's no guarantee that it ends in glory. So, you're lucky to survive, right? The goal is to not die. But, when you're working and walking through those circumstances that are extremely difficult in life, who does God say you are in the midst of that? And how does that truth change your capacity to hold pain and to hold space with people who are in struggle? Because for me, the journey is about being more like God, being more like Christ, being more Jesus-like in our daily lives. And Jesus held space with a lot of pain and struggle. He could feel all of that. God feels like everything we do to the least of these, we do to God. How much pain and struggle does he hold space with? And he invites us to be with him where he is in that. So it's increasing our capacity to do that with joy, with optimism, because God is always optimistic. I don't know how, I don't know why. He really has like a lot of faith in himself to be God. And if we can be like that, then we can walk, and our adventure is to grow that capacity in us so that we can then be the hands and feet of God with someone else in their life. So it's not about glory. It's not about success. It's about that identity transformation and being able to belong to people, even when it's hard, or even especially when it's hard.
I love that idea of growing our capacity to hold pain. Whoa, that right there feels really profound to me, and has been true in my own life as I've been on my hero's journey. That it's true that struggle creates a deeper capacity to hold pain. It's true. So I want to go to this idea of adventure. How do we define adventure? Because we all love that word. And what qualifies something to be an adventure? And I'm a coach who deals a lot in mindset. And so I wonder even, and I'm just going to pose this and you respond to it how you want, but how do we flip our script a little bit and say, even when we are going through something really hard, okay, this is an adventure. I'm going to grow my capacity here. I mean, just go with that. Like, what does it mean to be on an adventure, and how do we define that? Because I see, very practically, mountain climbing. Yeah, that's an adventure. And like, my husband's a mountaineer and he loves, same, like he's going to listen to this and totally be tracking with you. And I've done mountaineering. And so, yeah, that just feels like a really obvious adventure, but adventure is much more. So talk to us.
Yeah, I define adventure as the invitation to move outside our comfort zone. So in our comfort zone, we can be in control, we can be relaxed. Whether it's emotional challenge or physical challenge, social challenge, right? We can be in our happy place. And I think there are times that that's appropriate and good. But then we have that invitation to move outside of that. And that means that there's risk, there's the opportunity for failure. On a neurobiological level, you have adrenaline happening now, and you have these hormones that come in for neural growth. And neural growth only happens in that place. It doesn't happen in our safe space. That is rest, and that's important. But it's not the place that we should live all the time. So that invitation to challenge, that invitation to risk, the possibility of failure, creates enough stress on us that now we can learn new things. And like I said, you can't learn new things in your happy place. So the invitation to adventure then is that opportunity for growth. And you can approach it positively or negatively, right? You could approach it as it's a threat, that you're being attacked or something's a threat and that you have to survive it. And that's a whole different hormone scheme in the body. And that is learning and teaching you what to avoid. You're in fight or flight or freeze or fake. And so what you learn there is how to not engage it and how to shut it down or to survive. Or if we take the posture that Jesus did and that I see God take a lot, is that invitation beyond ourselves, that invitation outside our comfort zone, is a chance for new connection and identity and formation. And I like to think that God invites us into those challenges and we can respond with, okay, what do you want to give me here? Like, what do you want to teach me about who I am, or teach me about who you are? What gift that Jesus died for? What part of mercy or grace or endurance or resilience or forgiveness, do you want to teach me and give me in this place? So if it's an opportunity for something positive that we can carry with us, we'll approach it in a different mindset with actual different neurochemicals and hormones in our body that allow us to grow in an open way instead of just survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I would say adventure isn't always a positive word for me, because I am constantly assessing risk. And so to me, I'm like, well, tell me more. What exactly are we talking about? How uncomfortable am I going to be? And how dangerous is this situation? So I think for some of us, we're quite aware that adventure involves risk, but we're constantly trying to reframe it and say, okay, how can I grow from this? How can I make this a positive? Because the internal alarms are saying this is a negative. So how can maybe some of us are just more practiced in that, because even the small adventure that someone would think is no big deal to us might feel like a bigger deal. Would you say that's true, that people have different responses in that?
Oh, totally. And any one person's response can change based on the time of day, based upon what else is happening in their life. Like we don't always have the same posture all the time. We could, and maybe we have the capacity to deal with one kind of invitation to something uncomfortable. And then the next thing comes up and it should be small, because it's like, go to the grocery store and get milk. And you're like, well, I don't have anything for that. So even as people, even as individuals, we're highly dynamic in this. But what I've learned to say, especially with things that I feel are overwhelming, and I've had a lot of trauma, and I haven't lived the best, most amazingly perfect life. Yeah, that's a whole bunch of other stories. But in my own trauma and trial and struggles, I've learned to say, okay, God, I don't know how to deal with this. So either you change the circumstance, or you give me part of yourself and you help me and meet me where I am. So I don't try to be different than I am, but I have learned to ask for God for what I need. And I let him be God instead of trying so hard, because, I don't always have what it takes. I'm not always kind, especially pre-coffee. I'm not a Christian until I've had 2 cups of coffee. So, okay, God, you take care of life and then meet me where I am, and I'll walk into the adventures that you're inviting me into. It's not all things that are out there or struggles are things that you're supposed to engage in. I think our world tries to talk us into a lot of challenges and stress that we don't have to actually walk through. So that's what I've learned to say. God, you do it. Show me what you're doing. Tell me who I am. What do you have for me here? What do you want to give me? What do you want to teach me?
Yeah, that's very open-handed, and I think helpful too, because it does reframe it to say, okay, I mean, it acknowledges if there is fear or stress or anxiety in some way. It doesn't diminish that or minimize it or say that that's not valid. But what it says is the answer is asking God, what do you have for me right now? How do I meet you? Because you're here. How do I meet you in this place to meet those feelings?
Yeah, because faking is one of those threat responses. When you just stuff it and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna put on the right face or the right attitude and move through this. That's a threat response, actually. That's not an open-handed learning new things kind of response. So, and sometimes I find it easier to be open towards God because I don't know what I think about the people yet. Right? I don't know if I trust the people and feel like I can be open and emotionally vulnerable with the people. But if I can with God, then he can help hold, take care of me and hold me and show me and lead me in what to say and what to do and how to engage with the people that I might be struggling with. So it's just safer to start there. I don't know how, because it got to come out of the threat space. And that means that you need some sort of help. You need some sort of safety. And God is my safety. Now, if God's not your safety, then that's the journey to learn to trust him.
I really like that you focus on God rather than the people that may or may not be safe to trust at the moment, but you can focus on God. And then I also like that you brought in that fight, flight, freeze, or fake. I think a lot of times we don't say the fake. We just say fight, flight, or freeze. And the fake is actually it's a go-to for a lot of us. So I appreciate that a lot. Can you talk more about fear and the role that it plays in maybe preventing us from transforming or preventing us from going on the adventure in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why the hero's journey has the potential hero deny the call, right? It is a natural reaction that we all, that we all respond with. And so I think God is faithful to help us to move us to the place where we do answer the call. Sometimes that's pressure. Sometimes that's kindness. A lot of times that's pressure. Fear is foundational in how we perceive the world. And you don't have a lot of control. I don't believe, as a neuroscientist, I don't believe you have a lot of control over what you fear, what you don't fear. The fear is there or it's not. But how we respond to fear becomes the opportunity to make a different choice. And so in light of the fear, I know I need to be connected to something bigger than myself. And that for me is, my greatest place of belonging is with God. And I have learned to trust him more and more. So sometimes, especially when I was really struggling and facing a lot of challenges and didn't believe that God was good, I'd be like, God, I trust you, but I don't trust you. I love the Psalms for those kinds of places. I love, I believe, help my unbelief prayer in the Gospels for that. So I would commit to something even while acknowledging my fear, which I learned to do rappelling in the rock climbing world. So you go over the edge while you're attached to the rope. And every time, and I've done it thousands of times, every time there's like butterflies in my stomach because it's super risky. You're like, oh gosh, what if I fall? And I check all the equipment again, every time. So for me, my soul goes through the same process with God. I'm going to check my equipment again. I'm going to check in with God. No, God, are you here? You said you're good. I don't know if I believe you. I'm leaning, I'm trusting. This is super scary. And I'm just super honest with God about my feelings and my emotions while I'm leaning into that. And he helps me overcome my fear. And a little bit, I can learn to be less fearful, but it's still always there. I've just learned a better habit of going anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Because as somebody who really struggles with fear, I feel like the message often is it's just mind over matter and you shouldn't feel that way. Or in Christian circles, faith over fear. And I feel like it doesn't acknowledge I don't have any control over the feeling of fear, but I do have control over my response. And I like how you said the more you kind of lean into that and trusting God and seeing he's not going anywhere and he is faithful, then maybe the more natural it is the next time to lean just a little faster or a little deeper in the initial lean. And it's building that
bigger jump
muscle.
he asks you to take.
Yeah, right. It's building that muscle of response, but those fears might still exist.
Totally. We wouldn't be human if they didn't. And, I have a book that I wrote and I have a process of discerning the adventure. One of the processes to work through is identifying, is it a fear choice or a faith choice? Because we can end up with a lot of things in our head. And sometimes fear sounds like wisdom, but sometimes it is wisdom. But how do you know? How do you know if it's faith-based wisdom or fear-based wisdom? And so just a little exercise to go through, because once you have identified the fear choice, you can go, oh, okay, not that. And it doesn't have to be shaming. We don't have to be ashamed that we have fear. That'll paralyze us. But if we can be like, okay, I am scared. I do a lot of things in my life scared, but I've just learned to step forward anyway. And most of the time, God is right there helping me. A couple times they were not God's invitation. I'm just kind of stubborn and run at things that are oppositions. So I was scared and I was like, oh, my response is the step. Oh, wait, that wasn't right. That wasn't the adventure God was asking me to go on. So it didn't work out, but I learned a different lesson.
Yeah, that's really good that God will turn you if you're not on the adventure that he wants you on. That's encouraging. It also gets to this idea of change. And that is one of the questions I really wanted to ask you today is, how do we lean into the adventure of change? Because change, just even in coaching, I've done a lot of study and, people just fear the unknown. So they'll stay in something really unhealthy for much longer than they should. And I could even put that in the I statement that I will stay in situations or something that's really unhealthy a lot longer than I should, because we get comfortable with what is known rather than choosing the unknown. So how can we use this whole concept to help us with change?
Yeah, the unknown has the biggest fear trigger of almost anything in our lives as, mortals and humans. For me, what has helped me is others. So the identity part is I need to change my identity or something in my identity needs to be different. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm up to the challenge of that adventure. So that's when I lean into the belonging part, and I have the people, people with me who can, ideally, they're people who can see both, right? They're people who acknowledge and can see who I am right now. And like God has given them the right eyes to see on who I could be on the other side. Because I need a coach. I need, people need guides on mountains that they don't know. And we need disciple makers for this journey, because we need somebody to cheer us when it's hard and when it's scared, and it takes somebody else to help us to go where we haven't been before and we don't know if we can make it anyway. And sometimes I don't think we could by ourselves. Actually, you need that person to remind you why it's worth it, to remind you of what Jesus provided and what God has, and be that voice of the Holy Spirit in our life in a very concrete way, because we can get lost in our own heads sometimes and not know the different voices that are swirling there. So I lean into other people to help me. And I have deep relationship with quite a number of people. And they do. I was just talking with my prayer partner this morning. She's been my best friend since college orientation, our freshman year. And I'm like, I wouldn't be who I am today without her, because she helps me in those places I'm really struggling, and I get to help her too. It's a very mutual, reciprocal relationship in that. My husband does as well, but like I need multiple people, because I face a lot of trials, and other people have lives too. And sometimes they're in a struggle and they can't really hold that space with you. So I have a cluster in a community. So somebody can hold space and someone knows the right thing to say to me. And the Lord is faithful through all of that.
And I love that so much. I mean, the guide, right? The guide in every story. It's the Gandalf. It is the the Yoda, whatever person is going to guide you. It's so true. And it's so good. We all need that person. And I think that also gets to your book, your new book, which is all about disciple making and really coming alongside of people. So can you just give a quick snapshot of what you talk about?
Yeah. So I, having been in full-time ministry for over 20 years now, and taught people how to be, guides and disciple makers. I just wanted to write that for more people, because the books that I see on discipleship are usually either about the habits or the spiritual disciplines or the right things to believe, or being an organizational leader or pastor. And there just wasn't anything, or very, very little, that was written to the everyday person on how to be that guide and disciple maker, not looking at what you believe, but the relational journey. So I use the hero's journey as the framework. I talk about how to hear God with other people, how to be a good guide, how to hold space, how to help remind that person why it's worth it and why it is worth it on this side of eternity, why freedom and greater sense of belonging, greater sense of love, greater sense of joy, greater experience of the kingdom. Like we can actually experience that on the side of eternity. So as a disciple maker, you have to help the person know and remember that in the moments that they really need that encouragement. And then how to discern when the season changes. It's not a forever thing. Sometimes there are just lessons and seasons in our life where we need a specific type of voice and a specific type of guide. And as a guide, you can be that person. And then, okay, so then what do you do when that season's ending, and how to walk through that as well. So the book follows that. Like I said, it's written to every person, a little bit of neuroscience, quite a few adventure stories from my expedition guiding days. But just trying to help people be a good guide with one another.
So good. Well, thank you, Jessie. This has been so great. So great. I feel like, man, we need a part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with you on this, talking about all of this. I love it. I really love it. And I really resonate with what you're saying. So thank you so much. And I'll just point people to your resources to learn more. And we'll have that in the show notes today.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking with you.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.